working with women, but I fall more on the spectrum of spontaneous desire, of high desire. So I didn't feel that I could relate so much to women's experiences.
Yeah.
And I like to be contrarian. So I decided that I wanted to reach out a hand to men and say, let's see how we can work together on this and stop blaming each other and come together and understand. Not that there's not real hurts and, real oppression and all of those things without ignoring all of that, but
Sure.
because also women were asking, where are the amazing men that we can have as partners who can be masterful lovers, can handle their desire well, can really be present in the relationship? And I was like, well, if we as a women just sit around blaming men, we're never, like, blaming someone doesn't encourage learning or growth or connection.
Right.
So I was living in a school where, this is the last part of the answer. Okay. So I was living in a tantric community where many of the men undertook a practice of learning to choose when they ejaculated. And I was fascinated by this. And in that practice, most of them were able to learn how to have multiple full-bodied energy orgasms separated from ejaculation. And I had never heard of such a thing, but it was marvelous to experience in the men that I dated there, and also just fascinating for me as a scientist. So I undertook a research project to interview as many men in the school that I could. I think at least 50 of them came to be part of it. And I asked them, how did you develop energy orgasms? What do they feel like?
Agreed to be part of it? Okay.
What?
Agreed to be part of it? Came to be? Sorry.
Agreed to be part of it. Yeah. Decided to participate. Did not come to be part of it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Thank you for catching my
I was
Freudian
just trying
slips,
to make it a little funny.
so to speak. And so I did the whole research project, and really, I'm so grateful to all of those men who let me in on, what is a very intimate and tender and vulnerable experience and path that they'd undertaken. So I had my research work on the subject, and then my own personal experience dating some of these men, being lovers with them.
Yeah.
And then when I became a coach, I specialized in men's sexuality as part of my studies and my certification. And so that is how I got to this point today with my interest in it and my specialization.
Thank you. So my apologies. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but so I have this theory that a lot of guys, and this does fit or tracks, I think. A lot of men have trouble with premature ejaculation. And I have it that there's a huge psychological component where they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm fucking this beautiful woman, or I can't believe I'm having sex, or there's this weird thing that goes on for them, and then they just come. I don't know if that tracks with you. You did a bunch of research, but I think there's a huge psychological component.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that okay? Would you be willing to expand on that?
Yes. So, the number is escaping me right now, but by far the majority of early ejaculation that men have is what they call psychogenic, psychological in nature.
Sure.
Occasionally there's, biological, like something out
Sure.
of whack in the biochemistry, but most of the time it has to do with anxiety or psychology. And also that, for many hundreds of thousands of years, it was an evolutionary advantage to come soon, because then you would make more
To
babies.
ejaculate a lot.
Yeah. So be easy on yourselves, guys, if that's your case. It's
Right.
okay. It's understandable.
Sorry. And again, my apologies for not telling you about that beforehand, but I've had the consistent, like, whenever somebody tells me about it, I'm like, and I've had, I've been in open relationships. I've been in the BDSM community in the past. I've been, and lots of times I'm like, I think he just couldn't believe he was fucking you. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm fucking this amazing woman. And then because often I hear guys say, I don't normally do that, but
Yeah.
And so I was like, maybe it's just a psychological aspect. Anyway, sorry for the sidetrack.
Well, so many men today are amazing, and they really heard what women were asking, which was, can you please consider our pleasure in sex too?
Sure.
And so most of the men I work with really care deeply about their female partner's experience. And that can cause him to come out of himself and to only focus on her and to be extra nervous about having to perform and wanting to make sure she's happy. And then that just makes it all end too early.
There's also, I've noticed, for some men, they go too far down that tunnel and they start to build resentments.
Yes.
And maybe that's another, I want to get to the things we agreed to talk about, but I've talked to a few men who are like, well, what's in it for me or what? And so we should definitely talk about that component here. But part of the resentment piece, maybe we could hold to the side.
Yeah.
But let's talk about shame and its role in not expressing or maybe even worse, not owning your own desires and how that
Yes.
causes pathology.
Yes. Yes. 100%. One of my mentors, David Bedrick, focuses his entire work on shame, and he calls it, the master switch. So shame, I think, is one of the main causes of the dysfunction we see in the world today. Western religion has done such a great job of shaming us out of being okay with who we are and shaming us out of connection with our sexual self, our desire, or even that part of our body. I mean, I never even looked at my body below the waist until I was in my 30s because I'd been taught it was so shameful. So a lot of men feel shame because they've internalized this idea that in order to be attractive to your woman, you have to be the best, you have to be the alpha, you have to, last forever. And that if there's anything short of perfect performance, especially in sex, that she won't like it, she will criticize you, which some women do, unfortunately, or she won't want to have sex with you anymore. And so shame,
not helpful.
no. So shame causes a lot of that anxiety. It also prevents men from speaking up, from being able to say, hey, this is actually the truth of my experience. And I need to talk to you about this so I can relieve some of the pressure, so I can, defuse some assumptions that I'm making, and we can come together and collaborate. Shame prevents collaboration and true sacred union.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, the antidote to shame is self-acceptance. Self-acceptance doesn't mean being okay with being a jerk. It means you're unflinchingly willing to look at yourself, your desires, your thoughts, your feelings without judgment, positively or negatively, and being willing to examine that. I think sexual shame is really interesting. I think it's taught early on. I mean, don't touch yourself there, it's dirty, or there's so many things. I'm just gonna it's horrible that Western religion has done so much to shame people around sex, and yet that's where we see most of the sexual misconduct occurring in religions. I just posted something about $100 million lawsuit that was settled, a settlement for $100 million for some Jehovah's Witness thing. So I don't know what's going on there. Don't really care to investigate either. But what I do know is the antidote to shame and the defense against being shamed is self-acceptance. If they're like, you're a slut, yes, I am. I love sex just like everyone else does. And then actually completely diffuses someone shaming you. So for me, self-acceptance is the antidote to that. And really the antidote to so many things. If you accept and are willing to express your own desires in a way that's calm, open, you can say you like a thing. If they don't like it, okay, that's fine. There's no reason to, I'm in favor of everyone having their desires. I may not want to participate in them, but that's a separate conversation.
So there's a spectrum, right? And we tend to go to extremes in this society, where people think that they're afraid of unshaming themselves, and then they go direct into grandiosity, right? And so healing from shame and self-acceptance does not mean then you go around thinking, I am God's gift to women.
And then there's also kind of a fuck you aspect to it. Like, fuck you. This is what I want. Fuck you. That's also not helpful.
Yeah. I mean, you may have to go through that as a stage in the healing of shame. Yeah. But eventually my goal, and the goal that works for sacred relating long-term, is to come into a relational understanding of yourself, like caring about yourself and caring about your impact on the other person.
Yes.
Yeah. Great. Now, a lot of really powerful men, because I love working with powerful men, They think that self-acceptance equals passivity, or you stop trying to be the best. And I have to correct this all the time. I had to learn it too from my teacher of non-dual Shaiva Tantra, who said, self-acceptance includes accepting your arising desire to change.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No,
you don't subtract yourself from the equation when you
no.
love yourself and accept yourself. Like, it's a paradox, but that's what I love, is you can hold a paradox in your mind that you're okay just as you are, including your desire to change.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't, it's not a paradox. So
Okay.
for me, I'm sorry. For me, I don't, when you said all that, I was like, I'm super confused right now. It's not how it works. All right. So, let me ask you just a few like really direct questions.
Great.
What are the top three things a man can do to be irresistible to women?
That's such a great question. So, which I asked you to ask me that question. Yeah. Okay.
Mm,
All right.
I wasn't gonna, you're right. I mean, the person who thought of it was a genius. All right. So, so what are the top three things that men can do? Trying to be subtle. Um,
So I
all
want
right.
to talk about,
So actually, let me do a meta comment here.
okay.
If you've ever been asked to be interviewed by somebody, those of you who are out there like trying to get on podcasts, just give them 10 questions to ask you. Now, I asked Jessica to give me some questions. None of the things we've discussed so far are those questions, except for this one question.
Mhm.
But it's just a pro tip that I learned from a PR agent 25 years ago. If you're going to be interviewed, give them 10 questions. They'll be ecstatic. They don't, and then also it will drive the conversation in a way that will be helpful for you. Anyway, so what are the top three things that men can do to be irresistible to women?
Mhm. I love talking about this because mostly what men assume are the answers are not right. And they're probably going to hurt you with women. So, it's really easy to get the message from the media that the top three things a man needs to do to be irresistible is to be an alpha, which is a debunked scientific concept. And I wouldn't recommend trying that. Making more money, or having, lots of bling or shiny objects, or being an asshole. So
Yeah, it's
none
not.
of those actually work to have a high quality woman over the long term and have sacred intimacy. What does work is something that we're not taught at all, but this is foundational. All of the relationship therapists agree on this today in modern life, and it is be on a growth path. Have a growth mindset, which means do your own inner work, get out of your comfort zone. I think a lot of the story we were sold is that once you get married, it's a place to settle down, be comfortable, and just never question anything again and just assume it's all going to play out because it's natural. But nothing could be farther from the truth. So be continuously being a student of life and of yourself. Like, be in a men's group with really quality men who give you feedback on how you're showing up, so you don't slide into some way of being that's going to sabotage your sex life. Have a therapist, have a coach, do a program like my programs and the one I'll talk to you about at the end here. And but definitely be on a growth path and talk about that with your woman. So that's the first thing.
Yeah.
The second thing is also something that men just didn't get the message about when the balance of power shifted and we started sharing power, men and women, is that you need to be present in the relationship. It doesn't mean physically present. That means mentally, emotionally,
Yeah.
energetically present with her.
Yeah.
And two specific ways that shows up is something that hasn't quite shifted enough yet between men and women is women tend to do most of the thought labor, not just the domestic labor, but the thought labor.
What is thought labor?
Yeah, the thought labor is planning ahead for when do we need to go food shopping, who needs to take what kid to what appointment, who has the house cleaner's number or the babysitter's number, like what food is
Gotcha.
missing, right? So thinking ahead and leading and doing the thought labor around the schedule. So that's an example of being present in the relationship, but
Yeah.
also choosing to bring up the hard stuff. So many powerful men I've worked with told me that their fathers told them to never rock the boat. And that if there's yeah, and that if there's a problem, she will bring it up. This is catastrophic to modern relating.
Grab both sides of the rowboat and then laugh while you're doing it. I'm sorry, but no, like I don't want to step over a thing that I like. If I think there's a problem, you don't step over it. And I've also noticed in my, work with couples and singles, that, when I was like, you have to talk about these things. And I talk about agreements and truth over comfort and requests and all this stuff. But then they go, well, we said we're going to talk about I was like, you have to you have to have a deadline or a time or schedule a time you're going to actually discuss the thing.
Yeah.
And it might be uncomfortable, but you actually have to put it in your fucking calendar, because
Mhm.
otherwise it gets stepped over and that stuff builds and builds and builds until you're not even actually present with each other. You're present with all the shit you haven't talked about.
So well said.
And then it's just, you're not even like, it's not possible for you to be present.
Yes.
I like to,
So
I like
bring
to
up the
grab
hard stuff,
boat by both
guys.
sides.
It is courageous. Your woman will respect you, when you say, hey, I've been noticing this thing feels off. I feel disconnected from you. Let's talk about it, right? Don't bring it
Yeah.
up in a blamey, angry way, but by leading. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So may I?
yes.
My apologies for interrupting. So I've been leading a series with my friend Elizabeth Gaines about dating over 40.
Mm.
And I told her, I was like, hey, it feels like we haven't synced up in a while. It feels like we're a little bit off. Just want to, like we lost momentum. We did 3 and then she got sick and then I got injured. And I was like, hey, let's just have a sync up. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. This feels really good. You're
Yeah.
right. It's like, just say and in my experience, just say the thing on your mind.
Yeah.
Whether that's, oh my gosh, I love the way you look like that, or I love your hair that way, or those are great earrings, or it feels like there's something off.
Yeah.
Should we have a conversation?
Oh, I love
Just say
that.
the thing you're thinking.
Every time my partner does that, I totally melt. I'm just like, oh my God,
Yeah.
you were thinking about that. You remembered that. Oh, it's so good.
So
um,
circling back, my apologies for interrupting you, but I wanted to.
oh, I loved your example.
uh,
Thank you.
Great.
So the third thing is a whole can of worms that I don't know if I don't want to get into it today because we have a lot of other juicy topics.
I love worms.
All right. Well, I and men, I say this with a lot of love. Again, I'm here to be your secret weapon to help you master the art of women. But to be honest, the third thing is to understand about patriarchy and how it has affected women and still affects women. And by this, I mean, just read one book, by a feminist. Just read one.
Who would you recommend?
I mean,
Or what's the one book? I mean, Camille Paglia, who's a feminist, has gotten lots of shit for just liking fucking men. But
yeah.
she's an amazing feminist, I think.
Kate Mann wrote a book called like The Logic of Misogyny. There's
Okay.
also a more data-driven book that was named the 2019 Business Book of the Year, which is called Invisible Women.
Okay.
So just pick one. And look, I understand this is a whole conversation, and there's ways that feminism has gone out of balance and gone into hating men and all of that stuff. And the fact remains that, we were objects that you guys bought and sold and had total control over for all of history until the past 50 years, and I think a lot of guys don't realize how hard it is for us. This is just so that you can understand your woman. Like, why is she so wound up? Why does she insist on trying to lead all the
Sure.
time? Why is she trying to outlogic me? Why won't she ever relax? It's because we've been taught that being a woman is weak and inferior and less than, so we won't let ourselves be in the juicy feminine like play with you. And that's why I want you to understand it.
Thank you. Can I say a couple of things that
Yeah.
probably won't be controversial? That
Awesome.
every man should read about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1973 and 1974. It was when they outlawed financial institutions um, God, lost my,
Discriminating against women, like
thank you. Discriminating against women just
requiring
because
the
they were
husband's
women.
signature. Yeah.
Correct. So like a financial instrument, and I just did a live stream about just like my own, solo live stream about this, like over the about the Barbie movie. I think there's a lot of really ignorant men who don't realize why women are pissed off and
Yeah.
why and also the whole idea, they're like, oh, and a lot of, I don't want to get political, but a lot of conservatives are like, why is the family unit broken down? It's like, because she doesn't fucking need you anymore. She's got financial independence. She doesn't have to put up with your shit anymore. So that's the kind of, for me, if you read about the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of the I Googled
Mm.
it quickly, of the 93rd Congress, 1973, it was passed in October 74. So a lot of guys don't realize that it is about 50 years.
Yeah.
73, 2023, that's 50 years
Mhm.
when women actually were able to be autonomous financially. And so the breakdown of the nuclear family isn't about gay people or about modern, it's about women being like, I don't have to put up with your abusive shit anymore. And I know that, I'm 52. I don't know how old you are. So I think a lot of guys just don't realize this,
Yeah. Yeah.
or they don't have the emotional capacity to be empathetic about it, but just educate yourself.
Yeah. And I understand why everyone is angry. And if you want to really encourage and be a safer space and a irresistible space for your women to come towards you, it's going to really help for you to understand this about the history and how it's in our bones still. It's been passed down still. It's in the water so much. So anyway, let's
You know how I overcome all that.
tell me.
I love powerful, brilliant, autonomous women,
Woohoo.
but I also adore, ravish, and want to romance them. So, and I never blame I don't let men get away with, even after my horrible, I've told my divorce story to women and they're like, and they shiver. They're like, oh my God, I can't believe that happened to you. And I'm like, but it's not women, it was that woman.
Right.
But you can't generalize to a gender. And my biggest problem with relationship coaches is when they generalize to genders, they put memes out like about women or about men. I'm like, what are you doing? Stop it. You're creating more problems than you're solving.
And yes, yeah, I agree, because women are not a monolithic entity, and neither are you guys, men. I know I've been working with hundreds of you for the last 10 years.
Right.
And I'm talking about feminism from a place of acknowledging the oppression of women and also loving men. And working with men all these years, I've heard all the horror stories about how women misbehave and act out and have our own work to do.
Also, doesn't matter. Or just up level your choice around women. Like,
Yeah.
stop choosing psychopaths. Like, so
I
I'm
help
sorry.
I help a lot of men do that. I help a lot of it's not as easy as you think, it's a
Of
complex thing. So,
course it is. So speaking of marriage, what's the key to getting the sex back in a sexless marriage?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I love talking about this because when men come to work with me and when couples come to work with me, they invariably say, you are way more effective than our marriage therapist.
100%. Yeah.
Because therapists and the mainstream, I mean, bless them. Thank you for the work that you do. And a lot of my work, is inspired by therapeutic modalities, but the mainstream and, the education therapists do not teach about this topic. And this is the number one thing I correct for in guys that they have never thought of, which is be aware of the energy that you're giving off around your woman.
Yeah.
Yeah. We get stuck in the logicking because I work with very smart men who are very cerebral, very intellectual. It's all up here in the logic in the head. And I'm like, do you realize the energy you're giving off right now? Because there's a lot of anger and resentment that's just coming
Yeah.
at my system as a woman. And it does not make me want to feel safe to open to you sexually.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we reorient to the energy. And then that becomes the path. Okay, how do you shift that?
Yeah.
You don't shift it by suppressing and pretending that it's not happening. Same as with sexual desire. Right. But so that is really the key, is shifting the energy.
In my experience, one of the reasons I keep, so I have a lot of men like invite me to their men's groups, and invariably you'll have a guy in there who says like tracking back to one of the original things you said in the opening, these guys are like, I don't know why these women don't like me. Like, I'm fit, I made a lot of money, I always buy things. And I'm like, dude, it's because of how you're holding women energetically, and they
Yeah.
smell that shit coming off of you like Axe body spray. like,
Yes.
like, like if you resent women in general, who would, and vice versa. Like if a woman's like, men suck, why would you want to date that woman? Like it's
Yeah.
so obvious. And these, for some reason, these men, and by the way, it's one of the reasons I also lead these groups, is they don't want to hear it. It's like, it's
Mm,
not, it's nothing to do with any of the superficial stuff. It's how you're holding them in your mind. It's
yeah.
the energy that you're radiating when you're relating to her. Are you gracious? Are you appreciative? And do you look at the things you love about her or appreciate
Mm,
about her? Or do you have all this stuff in your head about women, and are you resentful because you didn't think it was going to go the way you thought it was going to go, or whatever?
yeah.
And women are, I don't want to make a sweeping generalization, but it's a positive one. So I'll let they're more limbically, or I'll say, yeah. So they're just more attuned. Um, and they feel more,
Mhm.
generally speaking. No offense to the guys who also feel more and have a highly developed feminine. My apologies. But in general, they're going to feel it.
Yeah.
And by the way, it's true with anyone. If you just if you have contempt for a human, they're going to feel it. Energy. They
Yeah.
may not be able to describe it, but they'll feel it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I really love opening a space where men can come to me and be real about all of that that's back in their head, the energy that's coming out, and to say, this is how I really feel. This is my resentment. This is my anger. And they've never been able to express that to a woman without being shamed or without her getting angry. And so, but it really does a service to you as men so that you can actually be congruent and powerful. And it does a service to the women of the world when the guys aren't walking around, with all the anger and resentment.
Can I talk about resentment for a minute before we drop into how a man can totally be confident as a lover if he's worried about not being able to perform?
Yes.
Thank you. The structure of resentment, in my experience and in my anthropological studies,
Mm,
is that it's allowing someone to continually cross over your own boundaries or overextending yourself unasked. Like they didn't ask you for it, but you're like, I'm going to give you this, I'm going to give you this,
yeah.
and then expecting something in return, but you're overextending.
I call that
Or
nice guy syndrome, making covert contracts like Robert
I
Goldber's
don't
work.
want, the nice guy thing has become like it's lost its, I don't know. Anyway,
Mm,
or someone asks you for a thing, you say yes, they violate your boundaries, but you co-sign it, but then you blame them for it.
yeah.
But really you should just be saying no. And that will solve that. And it's a lack of taking responsibility
Mhm.
for your own boundaries. And so there's a blame victim dynamic that goes along with it. When
Yeah.
Willie, you should just say, you know what, I'm sorry, I should have said no before, or I've overextended myself and I was expecting something in return, and that wasn't something you agreed to. It's unclean. But a lot of people, and I get what you're saying, that nice guy, like I don't travel in those circles.
Excellent. So this is why unintegrated and shamed sexual desire is such a problem, especially for men. Because if you are feeling overwhelmed by desire as a man, overwhelmed and unsatisfied, it will make,
Energetic blue balls,
yes, right?
to
If
use a
you're
horrible metaphor.
men everywhere are like, um, it makes men unable to say no, right? To be afraid of rejection, to overgive and overgive while wanting something in return,
Right.
right? Or to not have good boundaries when a woman's coming at them who's like manipulative or unhealthy.
True.
The sex desire I see is what makes people um cross their own boundaries or not hold their own boundaries. But I don't know, what do you think about that?
I think masturbating frequently helps. But also I've heard a lot of guys talk about like, no, you should hold energy. And I'm like, dude, I don't know how much life force you have, but I'm insane if I don't wake up, have my coffee, and masturbate. Anyway,
Yeah.
to another brilliant question: how can a man feel totally confident as a lover if he's worried about performance? And actually, hold on, can I say something first? I'm I'm one of those gosh, I forget the name because there's like 20 different versions of what, of what I consider myself to be, but I don't, and I know there's a demisexual. There's a word for somebody who only gets turned on when they have an emotional connection to someone. Maybe not be demisexual, but there's a word for it. And so I just warn a woman, hey, by the way, I might not be fully hard the first time. And this it's way before we have sex.
Yeah.
I'm like, and by the way, it might be the third time.
Yeah.
But then the third or fourth time we have sex, and I've had women like hit me, like punch me on the chest, like, God fucking, I didn't really like, they're like, I was like, yeah, no, it's fully hard.
Yeah.
But I warn them so they don't take it personally, because I've noticed a lot of times women are like, am I doing something wrong? I'm like, no. And so I started to warn them, like, I don't have sex before a third or fourth date
Yeah.
as a general for lots of reasons. But I'm like, hey, I want to, this isn't about you. It's about me. Like, I need to have a connection with you before, and not just the first time. So it might be the sixth time we've met before I'm even
Yeah.
fully hard. And I think just pre-framing that goes a long way. And it allows a woman to not feel like there's something wrong or she's doing something wrong.
Yep. Well, you
And
just answered the question. And I mean, I think
oh,
it's so hot. Yeah, it's exactly this. It's to out yourself and communicate and say, set expectations,
yeah,
just like you did. And actually, I find that even more attractive. Um, well, the other way of hiding and pretending and trying to perform is not attractive at all. Instead, like being really honest about,
yeah,
this is who I am, this is where I'm at, this is what happens, this is what my body does. Like, we are humans having a human experience here.
yeah.
You guys are not machines. But all the language around sex for men is like, you have to be a machine. And that's just so harmful. I call that the man box. Um, so
The man box. Go ahead. Go for it.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you can be totally confident as a lover. It's to fully accept yourself exactly where you're at,
Yeah.
meet reality where it is, and then tell her about it
Yeah.
beforehand.
Yeah.
And it's true, guys, a lot of women have been trained to take it personally if you're not hard. Just as much as you want to please women, I want you guys to know that women have been trained that we have to please you at any cost, the cost of our own pleasure, because we are afraid that if we don't please you, you might hurt us. You might get angry, you might hurt us, you might spread a rumor that we're a slut, you might destroy us in some way, right? So I know Me Too like had that go in another direction, but I just want you to realize that women also have the really wanting to please you mentality. And sometimes that manifests as taking things personally that we shouldn't.
And they think there's something wrong. And there, in my experience, there never is. So I just like to, by the way, so now I will say it's helpful if you are skilled with the female anatomy. So, and I want to tell you a story. So I had my last serious life partner, which was like 4 years. First time we had sex, I was not hard, but I hadn't had this conversation with her. We had just had so much built up desire. But I was like, but I love to eat pussy. And so and she told me like a year later, she goes, if you weren't so good, I would have never seen you again. She was like, if your oral skills, and I was like, oh, she's like, I've never had a guy not get hard for me. I was like, I told you, it was like the first time,
Yeah.
like once she got to know me, and we had so much built up desire. Like we've been flirting for, I think, 3 months.
Mhm.
And we finally, like, I rented like a very, I rented a suite. There was a lot of expectations, and I was like, you're amazing, gorgeous. Also, we haven't built enough emotional connection.
Yeah, so of
Um,
course you might not get hard in those circumstances.
totally. And it was really like the third, like, I am who I am. Takes me about 3 times of being sexual with a woman to be fully hard, period. But then I'm like, I want sex twice a day,
Yeah.
at least. Like, I'm like, I want to fuck the shit out of you all the time.
And yes, and you
But
guys, this
she did tell me, she's like, if you weren't as skilled,
I wouldn't
like
have
with
seen.
your fingers and with your mouth, we might not have ever seen each other again. So I do think there's also some benefit in a man having his attention on a woman's body in lots of ways, but also just having basic anatomy knowledge and
Yeah.
knowing all the things, how to feel for the ridges for the G spot,
Yes. So
how to
learning
like
pussy massage, for
all the,
example, I
yes,
have a
all the
whole
things.
video series for men
Awesome.
and women on that. And you guys, there's one book that's so great. It's called Women's Anatomy of Arousal. It's playful, it's fun. If you just read one, read that. And also, I'm not affiliated with them in any way. I'm just giving them a shout out because I think it's cool. But this organization called OMG, yes, you can watch videos of real women with their clothes off, touching themselves, and learn what women
Yeah.
want and like. And you can see it all, and the women are interviewed, and it's just very high quality production values. It's not porn, it's educational by the Kinsey
Yeah.
Institute. So it's very easy, and it's like $80 for a lifetime membership to OMGS. So it's very easy to get educated today. Yeah. Thanks for your story. And my
Again.
one of the best lovers of my entire life regularly did not get hard. And this is the last thing I would offer in answer to that question is reframe sex from performance like you're on a stage to being a scientist like you're in a laboratory and you guys are exploring together. And like, I don't know what's going to happen when you give each other permission to be awkward, to be silly, to have fun. Now, a lot of men protest and they say, but she doesn't like it. She will criticize me if I don't do it exactly right. And I
Sounds
say,
like the wrong woman.
yes,
Leave her.
you either need a different woman or, if you're married and you're just starting this, like have some
Yeah.
conversations about it. Yeah.
I think my funniest like incompetent story about like, I think so I go through long periods of unintentional celibacy. Like,
Mm,
as usually I get over a breakup, but then I'm looking for a better fit than before. So it's
yeah.
like I've had periods in the last like 15 years, I've had periods of celibacy of like 26 months and 18 months. And my most recent is 13, the 13 or look at the count. I think it's 14 months. And
Wow.
but one of my funniest stories was I met this the first time I was having sex with a woman. I think I had sex in, I think it was after the 26-month period. And we were having incredible sex, but I lost awareness of where the edge of the bed was. And
Good,
and
good
so
time.
I fell over backwards, and thankfully I landed on my feet, but I just started giggling. I was like, I'm out of practice. Like it just
So good.
and we just giggled, it was just funny.
And then
And
it
it was
gives her permission to like not get it right or
yeah,
be a
yeah,
mess.
yeah.
It's so fun.
And we were together for 4 years after that. But I was just laughing. I was like, oh my God, thankfully I landed on my feet. I'm out of practice, like, oh my
And
gosh.
see, sexual shame, especially purity culture for women too, often prevents us from being active collaborators with our men in our sex life. And so, men, if you really want to support women, please vote and support measures that give, full sexual education and that support women's pleasure and connection to our own bodies.
Yeah, let's not have Gilead become a reality.
Yeah.
The Handmaid's Tale, which is
Yes.
happening a
I,
lot. All right, all right.
I
I wasn't sure if you.
so
I mean, there's
the
also a pharmaceutical company that's named Gilead, but anyway, so
Ugh. So, but okay, another way to be confident is something that I was talking about at the beginning,
mhm,
which is undertaking a journey of retention mastery,
yes.
which is the program that I'm teaching with my dear friend Stephen starting in October. What did
So
you say?
so what is, well, actually, if you want to, what is Tantra? How does that fit into all of this? And if a man wanted to learn Tantra,
Ah.
where would he do it?
Right. So, I lived in a tantric community for many years, and I've spoken about that a lot. So many people come to me, couples and men, because they want to learn Tantra. And, the difference between classical Tantra and American Neo Tantra is like an hour-long class that I give in other places. But
You'll provide links that I can put in the comments for the.
sure, yeah.
Great.
And um and many scholars have studied the vast spiritual tradition that is Tantra,
Sure.
which generally has nothing to do with sex, but is really important for the development of American Western Neo Tantra.
Yes.
So Neo Tantra is what most people refer to as Tantra, and what I say it is essentially the unshaming of our sexual self. So it is just bringing the light of awareness. It's bringing breath, energy, intentionality, self-compassion to our sex life, our desire, and learning to work with our bodies and our desire and our sexual energy with skill, compassion, and intention. Right? Instead of just ignoring it, thinking it should just be natural, or thinking it's only for procreation, but no, really saying, okay, this is one of the most powerful energies, if not the most powerful energy present in our body.
It's life force, period.
Yeah.
I think
It is the power of creation. Yes.
it's life force.
So, shaming it is really not the way to go. I mean, just look at the Catholic Church and see how that's working out for them.
100%.
Yeah. So, Neo Tantra really is about the unshaming of that and working with it skillfully. And I love providing that space for people to come to me and to recover. I just had a client this week who spent 20 years completely ashamed of himself as a sexual being, unable to make love to his wife, and they finally actually reconnected and made love after 20 years of shame. So
Nice.
yeah,
Wonderful.
through the light, what I call the light of awareness, shining your awareness on the most hidden parts of us. Yeah. And so part of that is, sometimes Tantra gets associated with semen retention. And there are actually practices of that in the classical literature. And the reason that was done was to, use the sexual energy to move it up through our bodies, to use it as a blessing, to use it for magical purposes, and all of
recycle the energy, focus it into creativity, all those things, right?
Yeah. Yes. But unfortunately, sometimes it has been, again, like so many things, taken to extremes, taken to mean you must never ejaculate, like in some places. And
which
I
is
don't take that
biologically unhealthy.
Yes. Yeah. So I think,
Studies show.
I mean, I looked at the studies and they show correlation, not causation, but I still wouldn't go around messing with that. You know what I mean?
Just another.
What?
We'll set that aside. My apologies. We'll set that aside. My apologies.
That's
Please
okay.
continue.
You still don't want to go to extremes with these things. However, it is true that the male body is capable of non-ejaculatory orgasms, multiple orgasms, and we just don't get taught that. And that learning how to do that, and also learning how to have ejaculation choice, is true power and confidence for men. It's also magical. It's hella fun to do together. Super nerdy, turns sex into a true laboratory. I mean, obviously I have a bias here because I'm a scientist who likes laboratories and nerdy stuff. And I swear it will make your sex life so much more fun for so much longer if you undertake this journey. And you get to just see your woman in total soaked, drenched pleasure, like dissolved bliss of girl goo, for extended periods of time. And there's something so beautiful about that. When you have this awareness in your body as a man and you can choose, when you're going to have intercourse come to an end. Doesn't mean all the sex has to end, but
also having intercourse come to an end doesn't mean when you climax. And so first of all, I mean, you said experiment. I love that. When I used to, like 20 years ago, when I started leading courses, I asked people what their metaphor for life was. Was it an experiment? Was it a trial? Was it for me, it was like, well, it's an experiment, but also for sex, for me, it should be play. Like, let's
Yeah.
actually be playful, have fun, be silly.
Yeah.
And to your point about retention and all, I'm gonna dumb it down. If you're not attached to coming to climaxing, you can have there's a lot more range. You can be playful, you can try different things. You can stop for a bit, have some food or some berries, or giggle or watch a thing, and then be like, oh my God, I'm not done with you yet.
I love
Like,
that moment. It feels
yeah.
even better when you like
Mhm.
take a break and then go back to it.
It's like, I need to fuck you some more. I'm sorry. And she's like, no, it's fine. um, so yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. I
Uh,
love it.
thank you.
I mean,
So,
that's my whole MO for everyone listening is range. You know, there's a lot of
right,
dogma out there, and my dogma is kind of, I am the dogma of no dogma. I,
same,
I'm,
same season. Yeah.
yeah, I'm interested in helping you play along a whole energetic range and expand your pleasure possibilities, expand your skills as a lover so that you have more fun, choice, variety, things are new, you know, you get to change it up. So there's that.
Yeah.
And then as a man, when you undertake a practice like retention mastery, which is a serious practice because you're uncoupling these two things, ejaculation and orgasm, that have come together.
So serious.
Yeah, serious. It is. It's what I mean is it's a real discipline that takes commitment and it's a challenge. It's undoing, you know, probably decades of this habit of having ejaculation and orgasm be the same thing.
Yeah.
And it will force you to confront a lot of your shadows. Like, how do you relate to your genitals? How healthy is your physical body? What about your emotional body? What are your unconscious narratives about sex? What about fears of rejection? So it is one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful self-development path that I believe a man can undertake today. And it's been my honor to support men going through this work. I'm just in awe of the magic that can happen in the male body when men do this.
And for me, I mean, so thank you for saying all that. And we should probably end right there because that
Mm.
kind of felt like a climax. But 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 given who I am, you know, I will also say that for me, like dumbing it down, because that's a really advanced conversation actually. Dumbing it down, I think a lot of guys would just benefit a lot, and they will get better results with the women that they're engaging with if they uncouple the desire to climax, period, or not the desire, the attachment.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like you can leave and I'll jack off, like if I really need to, but for her to be like, oh, I didn't have to like the female performance that we talked about early on, like, oh my gosh, she's not hard, is that a problem? No. Did he not come? Now, I have had lovers who are addicted to
Yes.
being filled up.
Yes. I mean, there's
um
something hot about that.
there is definitely a fetish there, and I love it, and I love it when they ask for it. I'm like, now, and they're like, yes, and I'm like, you got it, like,
Yeah.
not a problem. But if you also have the mastery over when you're going, like I have I think you and I talked about this, and I was taught some of these things early on, not in any formal way, but I've had women get pissed off at me for not coming,
Yes. So,
and so I will
yeah.
oblige, but after lots of, I'll say, informal training or self-discipline, I can oblige them in about 90 seconds.
Mhm.
But also, I have never had an unintentional orgasm. Or twice I've had unintentional orgasms in my life, but never with a lover. They've always been like super random situations. And that is the kind of mastery over your own body that you
Yeah.
can achieve by working with Dr. Harvey. Is that?
Yes.
Because
And so all of these things, so
I don't do that work. I just
I'm co-teaching this course with an amazing man, Stephen, who's mastered this for the past 12 years. And we're going to address all of those concerns. Like, what do you do if she gets mad at you if you don't come? Because men have told me about that many times.
oh yeah.
You know, what do you do? When do you know sex is over? What do you do if you're still hard afterwards? You know, how do you work with all of this? And we have all of the esoteric techniques from all of the
Right.
world's traditions to teach to you, that I have been practicing myself actually to work with my own sexual energy too. So this is both a highly inspirational and a highly technical course, but we will answer all of those concerns
And
with
when
pleasure.
does the course begin, and how can they find out about the course?
Yeah, so early bird ends September 10th. So that's coming up. And so in about 10 days, early bird ends.
How long is the course?
It's
And
8 weeks.
wait, and hold on, my apologies.
Mm.
I dropped into one of their live streams, and I rarely say this about, like, he's got really clean energy. I don't know the guy, but also he seemed to, like, he felt, it's going to sound very feminine, but he felt clean. He felt like he's operating with a lot of integrity. And I've known Jessica for, well, we've known of each other for 4 years now, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's a scientist. So anyway, so when does the course start? Let me ask you a few.
It starts October 4th. It's 8 Wednesdays.
Great.
And so, 8 weeks is enough for us to impart to you the path and everything you need, and for you to get started with your pleasure practices and your masturbation practices, your training for this. Some men will be lucky and they will develop this in 8 weeks, but normally you're going to need to keep going on your own and keep practicing.
And when you say 8 weeks, these are just questions I've heard from a lot of men. What's the time commitment?
Yeah,
So,
it's
like,
an hour and a half live call with both me and Steven every week for 8
great.
weeks. We have a break in there, so technically it's 9 weeks. And then you will have a practice to do in between sessions. Ideally you
Great.
would do 30 minutes for 3 times a week to make maximum progress, but it's up to you. You can start the actual in-depth training whenever you have time. We will just be giving you all of the instructions and say, like, this is what you do when you're ready to do the training.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and then for the sales part, please repeat again when the early bird ends, and also how they can, what's the website address?
So go to my website. It's bliss-science.com/retention mastery. And we'll put the link below.
Great.
You can sign up immediately right then on the page. And if you have any questions, feel free to DM me on Facebook. I'm Jessica Ananya, Ananya Harvey on Facebook, or at bliss.science on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn as Dr. Jessica Harvey. And so, but all the information is on the page, and we are super thrilled. We can have up to 30 men in this cohort. They're already signing up. And when you sign up for the early bird, you get a 1-year subscription to Steven's platform, Relationflix, which is a hell of a value. He has tons of short courses on everything from, like, BDSM to consent to everything you need to know about relating on his excellent platform. And Steven is, like, so passionate about this and so eloquent in how he teaches it. I'm thrilled. I've been wanting to offer this for years, and it's going to be amazing.
He felt really, like, I don't really say this about a lot of guys in this field, but he felt really, I was in there for 15 or 20 minutes, I think. He felt really clean. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we just thank everyone for attending or watching in the future?
Yeah, thanks everyone for being here, and feel free to reach out to me, DM me with any questions, or just keep the conversation going. I mean, I could have talked for a whole other hour about
Well, there's at
magic
least
and
4
beauty of
more live
retention.
streams we could do if you're
Fantastic. Yeah. So, but this is one of my favorite topics, and I've seen so many men undertake this journey, and it's brought them a lot of power and confidence in their life. So I hope that that if you have any curiosity, just take the plunge, because you will never regret it.
I mean, what could what's the everything to gain, nothing to lose?
Exactly.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Harvey. I
Thanks,
appreciate it.
Jason.